Hey everyone and welcome. Today we're diving into the world of eviction in Nigeria. Now, you might think there's just one standard process for this, right? But the truth is, a lot of real-world situations are way more tangled and complicated. We're going to try and unravel some of those knots today.
So is it really as easy as a landlord just saying, you need to get out? Not even close. There are so many special scenarios that can turn a simple eviction into a total legal labyrinth. Let's get into it and see what makes these cases so tricky. All right, first step, the standard eviction path. Before we can even touch the really messy stuff, we've got to understand the baseline, the way it's supposed to work.
It really boils down to these three key steps. First, the landlord has to issue a quit notice, which officially ends the tenancy. If the tenant still doesn't leave, the landlord then serves a second notice, the notice of intention to recover possession. And only after both of those have been served correctly and the time on them has run out, can the landlord finally go to court. This is the absolute foundation for everything else we're going to talk about.
Okay, moving on to common tenancy hurdles. Now that we have that foundation, let's get into some of the most frequent problems that pop up. Issues with rent, and of course, the agreements themselves. I mean, it's probably no surprise that the number one reason landlords start the eviction process is unpaid rent. But here's the thing. Even when the reason seems totally black and white, a landlord can't just cut corners. That legal process we just talked about, it's completely non-negotiable. You see, the law strikes a really crucial balance here. A landlord can't just throw someone out. They have a duty to serve all the proper notices and prove the rent is actually owed. And on the flip side, the tenant has an absolute right to get those notices and to defend themselves in court if they feel the eviction is illegal. It's a built-in system of checks and balances. Now let's talk about another massive headache, the handshake deal. In Nigeria, believe it or not, an oral tenancy agreement is legally valid. But man, when a dispute happens, not having anything in writing creates a whole bunch of problems for literally everyone involved.
This is where that handshake deal becomes what you might call a legal ghost. The law says it exists, but it's almost impossible to pin down in court. Without a written contract, everything just turns into a he said, she said argument. I mean, how do you prove what the rent was supposed to be? Was it a yearly tenancy or a monthly one? The answer completely changes the notice period you need. It's all incredibly tough to prove, and you can bet the court is going to look at these cases with a magnifying glass.
All right, let's wade into even deeper waters. Business and family. This is where things can get incredibly complex, either because a business is at stake or because family drama gets thrown into the mix. For someone renting a commercial space, an eviction isn't just about moving. It can literally mean the death of their entire business. Think about it. They've invested so much time, money, and effort into that specific location. This economic reality is a huge factor in how these cases are handled. So yeah, a commercial tenancy covers shops, offices, workshops, basically anywhere a business operates. And while the legal eviction process follows the same basic steps as a residential one, the courts are very aware of the potential economic damage. So they often approach these cases with a lot of extra caution to make sure everything is completely lawful and absolutely necessary. This question, right here, gets to the heart of another huge complication. In Nigeria, it's really common for properties to be owned collectively by a family. So when it's time to evict a tenant, who might even be another relative, who actually has the legal right to sign the papers and go to court? And here's where all the pitfalls are. You've got multiple family members claiming ownership. Maybe there are ongoing inheritance fights or informal agreements made years ago. But the most important point is this. The person who issues an eviction notice must have clear, undisputed legal authority. If they don't, the entire case can be thrown out before it even really begins. Next up, we're looking at a real tug-of-war that happens in the courtroom. Compassion versus procedure. It's the human element fighting against the cold, hard letter of the law. You know, the law isn't always just a blunt instrument. Judges have discretion, and they can consider the real-world impact of an eviction. So if a tenant is, say, a family with small children, or someone who's elderly or vulnerable, a judge might grant them a short grace period to find another place to live. This isn't about denying the landlord's rights, it's about trying to balance them with a sense of fairness and equity. But that compassion only goes so far. It's definitely not going to save a landlord from these classic case-killing mistakes. We're talking about a single typo in the notice, miscalculating the notice period by just one day, or failing to prove you actually delivered the notice.
Any one of these slip-ups can get the landlord's entire case thrown right out of court. Every single step has to be perfect.
So as we start to wrap this up, it's pretty clear that Nigerian tenancy law is really all about a carefully constructed balancing act. It's designed to protect the landlord's property rights, while at the same time safeguarding the tenant's right to have a roof over their head.
So let's boil it all down to the key takeaways. For landlords, follow the process to the letter, keep amazing records of everything, and if you are ever in doubt, get legal advice. And for tenants, know your rights, especially your right to get proper notice. And while you need to understand your obligations, don't ever be afraid to stand up against an illegal eviction attempt. Look, if you take just one thing away from all of this, let it be this. Following the correct legal procedure is absolutely everything. It is the cornerstone of a fair process and an outcome that can actually be defended. It protects landlords from legal trouble, and it protects tenants from being unlawfully thrown out of their homes.
And that leaves us with one final thought. At its core, every single eviction case is grappling with this fundamental tension, a person's right to their property versus another person's need for shelter. It is a deeply complex and human issue, and watching the law try to find that incredibly delicate balance is what makes this topic so endlessly fascinating. Thanks so much for joining me.